This took place in the winter of 2005 in rural Iowa. I was 18 years old and attending community college. I've always been an outgoing and talkative person and managed in my youth to make friends quite easily. Carrie and I met when we were seated beside each other in a math class we both were enrolled in. We weren't automatically friends because she was a divorced single mom of 2 small boys and she was in her late 20s. I was a teenager just out of high school, still living with my grandparents. We just didn't have a lot in common on the surface, and she was usually quiet and just did her work. One day I had a bad case of the hiccups. I don't know how long I had been hiccuping for, but I distinctly remember grumbling and being pretty mad about it because 1, I hate math, and 2, I hate the hiccups. I faintly realized that I was expressing my displeasure with my situation louder than I had thought. When I felt Carrie's eyes on me, I looked up from my desk and said, "Ugh," while hiccuping a bunch of times. "What?" She smiled and started asking me all kinds of questions about my hiccups. Did they hurt? Was it a sharp pain or a dull one? Was it making me angry, and what did it sound like? This whole time I'm answering her questions, thinking that she's nuts. When her final question is posed, she says, "Can you hiccup one more time so I can hear it?" I tried, but they were gone. She was a damn genius. I started hanging out with Carrie more and more at school, and then we started going to her house to smoke bowls and cigarettes until I would finally get tired of her screaming kids or tired of watching her surf through her matches on dating sites all over the web. That was the thing about Carrie that I hated. She was a member of almost every dating site available, as long as they were free, and was constantly updating and changing these profiles. Her entire days were consumed with checking out matches or chatting with men on Yahoo Messenger. All this seems innocent enough, but it didn't end with the internet. It started there. She would decide to meet these men, sometimes having them over to her place or going to their houses. She always slept with these creeps too. And while she occasionally dated the same guy twice or maybe 3 times, she was very clearly not seeking an actual relationship. While I was worried about Carrie's overly sexual behavior and her attitude, I didn't feel like it was my place to say anything. She seemed to understand that what she was doing was indeed risky because one time she asked me to come over to her house because a guy was coming to pick her up and she wasn't sure if he was who he said he was or not. I told her I didn't know what the heck I would do to help. I'm 5 foot nothing and 125 pounds soaking wet. But I went ahead and went over to her house to wait the arrival of her newest love interest. Right on time, Mr. Internet shows up and my friend leaves. Fast forward a couple of months and Carrie found a new guy in a town that I call Louisiana in my head because he claimed to be from the swamp somewhere outside of New Orleans. Louisiana didn't have a vehicle and therefore was unable to visit. I guess the fact that she couldn't go out with him and screw him made this man so much more appealing than the rest. She would literally not shut the heck up about wanting to meet Louisiana. Apparently, he had told her that he lived in the biggest house in his small town, about 2 hours, one way from the town we lived in. He supposedly had a large amount of money in stocks and bonds somewhere in New Orleans in a safety deposit box. He described his home as a big, beautiful 3-story Victorian with 5+ bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. He also spoke in a cute Cajun accent. Louisiana is all she would talk about, and she was driving me crazy. One day, Carrie is all excited because Louisiana has finally saved up enough money to send her for gas, so he's planning a visit. I don't know why, but I didn't really feel right about her trip, but I was very suspicious of this guy. I told Carrie about how I felt, but because I had no actual evidence of his creepiness, it was nothing more than a gut feeling. My gut was not getting in the way of her weekend with Louisiana, that's for sure. Apparently, I was not the only one who felt that this guy may be a creeper, and Carrie's Aunt Becky decided that she would be going with her niece to meet this too-good-to-be-true guy. I should mention that this savior aunt was really only 3 years older than Carrie, so while she was older than both of us, she was only 29 or 30, really, and a very heavy drinker. I look back and have absolutely no idea what the heck possessed me to go with them to meet this man. But for some reason, I decided to tag along with Carrie and Aunt Becky to meet a man that I was almost positive was a creep. I, of course, lied to my nanny and grandpa, telling them that I was staying the weekend just across town at Carrie's house. As I am typing this out, my face is flushed, my hands are shaking, and my heart is beating so fast and hard that I feel like I might pass out. The events of this particular evening are fuzzy and broken. I've never said a word of this to anyone ever. Carrie, Becky, and I never spoke of it, and I moved to Texas just weeks after this happened. I have kept my mouth shut about the entire thing because I know that I was stupid to go with them. The 2-hour drive seemed to go by in absolutely no time at all, and I was very obviously anxious about meeting this dude. Carrie and Becky both seemed unconcerned and passed around a joint and bottle of some alcohol. I hit the joint hoping to calm down a little bit before getting to Louisiana's Victorian mansion. I was immediately alarmed upon the arriving at the mansion in question. Dilapidated old house was a more accurate description. The house had been painted white recently and was 3 stories, so I decided to not judge the house by its street view. Louisiana had promised it was not a problem that Becky and I both decided to tag along, and had invited a friend of his own to stop by for a little while later that evening. He had told Carrie earlier that day that since he slept upstairs in the bedroom, we ladies could have the whole second story to ourselves. When I saw the outside condition of the house, I felt another gut-wrenching feeling that something wasn't right. I told my friends that I was too lazy to carry my overnight bag inside and said that I would get it later. They shrugged it off as nothing, and Becky and I exchanged a quick nervous glance before following a very excited Carrie. The front door opened before we even reached the porch, and out stepped a short, doughy white guy with thinning hair. "Howdy there. Y'all ladies must be my ladies' friends." I almost laughed out loud at this man's quite obviously fake Cajun accent, as Carrie had called it. I was born and raised for most of my life in Texas, so I know a southern accent when I hear one, and this was a really bad impression of one. More alarm bells in the pit of my stomach as I get a good look at Carrie seeing her lover boy for the first time. He was obviously aware of her staring, and why? Because he immediately began apologizing for the older pictures he's had to send her. He claimed that the pictures she was receiving from him were of him just from a few years ago. He waved us inside, and even though he had lied about his mansion and his appearance for some damn reason, we all followed. So, there we were inside a strange house with a strange man, and I was positive that we were in trouble. I wasn't sure what the threat was yet, but I felt it, like acid eating away at my insides. Louisiana ushered us into the living room and offered us a drink. He was very insistent that we have something, anything to drink. We all declined, but decided to smoke a bowl and let Carrie and Louisiana talk a little bit. I was listening to every single thing he said, and I kept looking at him even though I never contributed to the conversation between him and my friend. I was listening to him describe his life as a born and raised Southern gentleman, and wondering to myself if he had ever even visited a state below Missouri. He seemed to spew BS, but my friend was oblivious to the lies over everything as simple as the weather in the southern states to the pronunciation of a typical southern word. I decided to ask for a tour of the house, and he seemed to be irritated with me for asking, but when Carrie insisted, he reluctantly decided to give us a very quick tour. We saw the living room, kitchen, and 1 bathroom on the main floor, but all the other doors were locked. He led us up a short, narrow flight of stairs and showed us a quick peek through a doorway to what was supposed to be his room. I immediately felt like he was lying because there was dust all over everything, but brushed it off as nothing. Maybe he hadn't slept in his bed for a while. Every single other doorway, minus 1 bathroom, was nailed or painted shut. The tour was making me feel even more sick to my stomach, and I really started wanting to leave, but I didn't know how to tell Carrie and Becky without him hearing. He led us back downstairs into the kitchen, where he had a big pot of beans on to boil. He ran to the stove and started ranting and raving about his Nan's gumbo recipe and demanded that we try it. I walked over to the pot and told him that it looked like beans to me because gumbo should have some sausage or something like that. At this point, Louisiana decides he doesn't like me very much, so he just starts ignoring me. About an hour goes by and his friend shows up looking all sorts of creepy. He doesn't introduce himself or even make eye contact with any of us. He just walked in, sat down, and sparked a joint. I was okay with that because, man, my anxiety was through the roof. I could tell that Louisiana, Carrie, and Becky were all getting tired of my excessive questions. Sometime during that joint, Louisiana left the room to get us all some freshly squeezed lemonade. I remember him warning us that it could be bitter because he used real lemons and didn't like a lot of sugar. Halfway through my drink, I noticed the way he wasn't really engaging in conversation with us ladies anymore. He was watching us. Or watching me, like he was waiting for something. I felt like he was waiting for me to say or do something. He went from completely ignoring me to watching my every movement. I became extremely nervous with his gaze so intense on the side of my face that I kicked Becky's foot and motioned towards him with a, "The heck is up with this guy, look." She saw exactly what I was talking about after a few more minutes of him just staring at me as Carrie rambled on about something. I suddenly decided that I had to get the heck out of that house, and I jumped up out of my seat like I had been electrocuted. "Oh, sorry, but I left my bag outside. I'm gonna go grab it." Carrie abruptly stopped talking because of my swift movement and scared tone of voice. She looked up at Louisiana, seeing his intense glaring in my direction, and as if truly seeing danger for the first time, She stood up and followed me towards the door. I quickly and quietly whispered to her that I had to leave. I told her that I wasn't feeling well and wanted to go home. I started out the door with Becky and Carrie following close behind. I will never forget walking away from that house and that man. I was terrified he was going to follow us. He was asking where we were going, and Becky threw him some lame answer about going to the convenience store and that we would be right back. I'm honestly not sure what it was that made both Carrie and Becky blindly follow me out of that house. Like I said before, he hadn't left us alone together, so I couldn't express my fears to them verbally. They had both seemed irritated with my excessively questioning him. I don't ever remember asking them why they believed me when I said I had to go. Maybe they both felt it too. His sinister stare as if trying to incinerate me with his eyes. We were almost 20 minutes away when whatever he had been waiting on took effect. I started hallucinating and felt oddly sedated, not connected to my body. My speech became slurred and I drifted in and out of consciousness for the rest of the way home. Both girls assumed that I had simply passed out from exhaustion and had together carried me into her kid's bedroom. I woke up throughout the night often, all in different stages of panic, but I couldn't manage to stay awake more than a few minutes at a time. The next day I had a horrible headache and my body felt like I had run a marathon. I woke up, wrote Carrie a goodbye note, got in my car and went home. I never spoke to Carrie or Becky again after this incident and I hope to never see them again. I think of how much worse it could have been and thank my lucky stars I'm not dead. So, creepy online dude, let's not meet. Edit. After numerous inquiries about Carrie and her well-being, I decided once again to search for her. It's been approximately 5 years since I attempted to look her up and I couldn't find a single reference for her. She has apparently divorced and gone back to her maiden name, so I was able to find her now that I am searching for the correct person. She looks fine, just like her old Carrie self. Apparently she learned her lesson. Some years ago, couch surfing was still a new thing, and I, female, early 20s at the time, was a very active user on the platform. I stayed with many hosts as a traveler, but also frequently hosted couch surfers in a little 2-bedroom apartment I shared with an amazing roommate in a small university town. I didn't get too many requests, but all reviews were positive. What's important to notice, couch surfers were sleeping with me in the same room on an inflatable mattress. Of course, I would always vet hosts and guests before accepting or sending requests, trying to filter out weirdos and creeps. My system seemed to work. Fast forward to the last person I ever hosted. I had spent the night in another city with a group of friends. We had gone to a concert, slept at a friend's house, and took a train back home the next morning. We were all visibly hungover, wearing sweatpants and no makeup. In my country, the train ticket is cheapest if you travel in a group of 5, an incentive to not use the car. So, waiting in front of the ticket machine to find more people to share the ticket with was very common. We were 3 broke students and happy to add 2 more people. During the train ride, I started to chat with one of the guys on our ticket, a traveler with a tent and a huge backpack who was not connected to the other person on our ticket. This backpacker told me that he was from New Zealand, in his early 30s. Probably a lie, he looked older and had been traveling through Europe for the past 8 months with no plan of going back anytime soon. We ended up chatting a little bit about travel, philosophy, cultural differences, etc. Throughout the train ride, nothing out of the ordinary. I mentioned that I had a boyfriend, a long-distance relationship, very early on in the conversation. This will be important later. After a while, this guy came up with couch surfing and asked if I was familiar with the concept. Being the proud veteran I was, I started listing all the people I'd ever hosted and all the places I'd ever stayed at. He bluntly asked me if I would be able to host him for a couple of nights because he was interested in my student town. I was a little hesitant at first, but I guess my brain was not functioning properly to tell him no directly. I called my roommate to ask if she would be home and whether she was okay with the guest. She didn't mind, and I told him I would host for this night only because I had stuff for university to finish the next day. Not a lie. The first and easiest chance to avoid this creep was missed. The train arrived, and we went home to drop our stuff off and proceeded with a quick tour through the old town. Bear in mind I was still hungover and hadn't had time to take a rest. He didn't seem too interested in the city tour and asked me if we could go shopping instead. We ended up at H&M, where he bought a t-shirt and some underwear. He kept asking me for my opinion on color and style before buying. A little strange, but fair enough. Afterwards, he tagged along when I went grocery shopping for dinner, where I also bought 2 bottles of wine. While still out, he asked if he could stay longer, but I declined. Overall, he made me a little bit uncomfortable, but I brushed it off, telling myself that it was only one night and he would be gone by tomorrow. There goes my second chance to give him the boot. At home, he took a shower that lasted well over an hour. When he finally came out of the bathroom that had turned into a steam room, he was wearing his new t-shirt and also the underwear, which I would find out later. In the meantime, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner and my roommate had arrived home. He then lounged in my room, charging his phone and using my computer to look up where he wanted to go next. This was before smartphones were widely used. When I went back to my dorm, I casually asked him for his profile on Couchsurfing, the reason why he was sitting in this very room. He casually replied that he had deleted his account a while ago. What the heck? Why would a person backpacking through Europe delete their account? It didn't make any sense, and in hindsight, I should have kicked him out then and there. No further questions asked. But it was already evening and wrongfully felt like I had to be a good host until the next morning. Big mistake and third chance missed. Dinner was fine overall. We ate and shared a bottle of wine and 3. My roommate, however, couldn't stay with us for longer because she worked in the hospital and had to wake up really early. Helpful for later. The couch surfer creep stayed seated at the table and reminded me that I had bought another bottle of wine, which should be opened now. I politely told him that I was done drinking for the night. Remember the hangover? But if he wanted, I could open the second bottle for him alone. I thought he would decline, but I was wrong, obviously. He proceeded to drink half the second bottle, and once he noticed my liquor collection, he tried to convince me to do shots with him. I gave him the same reply as before, and he went for 2 or 3 shots while I was watching him. The quality of the conversation downspent rapidly, and I said I would stay in the kitchen for a little bit to do the dishes and work for university, and invited him to relax in my room in the meantime. Translation for: leave me alone and go to sleep. I was seriously not in the mood for dishes or work, but figured it would be better than talking to him. This plan didn't work out because he kept bouncing back and forth between the kitchen and the room, trying to strike up a conversation again. I was not very interested though, and eventually he gave up and went to sleep around midnight. Once I heard him snoring, I went to bed as well. All good, you might think. Well, far from it. During the night, I had a weird sensation. It felt like something on my mattress was moving. I later found out that the guy had reached over from his mattress to pull on one corner of my bed sheets in an attempt to wake me up. At night, however, I wasn't aware of this yet, but it kept me drifting in and out of sleep. Around 4 a.m., the couch surfer decided to go to the bathroom. Once he came back, instead of going back to his bed, he stood at the end of mine, staring at me for several minutes while I was wide awake but pretended to be asleep. At this point, I freaked out internally and was cursing myself for my naivety on the train. Eventually, he went back to his bed but immediately started whispering repeatedly, "Are you awake?" I figured I had to answer, pretended to just have been woken up, and asked in an annoyed voice what he wanted. He replied, "Well, I woke up and I have a lot of energy in me, and I want to use it up." Appear romantic. Me. And why are you telling me this? Well, I know you have a boyfriend, but it's really difficult as a guy to travel alone for such a long time. Whose heart wouldn't melt after such a passionate declaration of love? I just told him that wasn't my problem, jumped out of bed and went to the kitchen. No way was I going to stay with him in the same room after he admitted to wanting to use up his energy. He followed me to the kitchen and asked why I was no longer in bed. I answered that I didn't feel comfortable with him in the same room anymore and would like him to leave as early as possible. He pointed at the t-shirt and underwear he was wearing and said, "I only bought those for you, you know, and spent $30 for nothing." Thanks for the effort, I guess. I simply shrugged and opened my laptop to distract myself. Instead of packing his stuff and leaving immediately, he was restlessly bouncing between the kitchen, bathroom, and my room, doing a series of weird things I don't all remember. The top 3 of those were washing his hands and face at least 10 times in a row. Pre-COVID, mind you. Filling a glass with water, circling it around, and pouring it back into the sink repeatedly with the water running from the tap, and when I asked him what the heck he was doing, coming awfully close to me, looking me into my eyes intensely saying, "Some things from the childhood, they remain, and you can never go back and change them." This last thing really freaked me out, but thankfully that was the time my roommate woke up and entered the scene. I quickly filled her in about the night's events in a language the guy didn't speak. Finally, he got the message that there wouldn't be any energy use up time and started packing. My guest eventually grabbed all of his stuff, turned around to look at a picture of my boyfriend and me inside, and said, "He's a lucky guy." But before finally going out of the door, he asked me for my number. My initial thought was to shout at him what was he thinking, but I figured since he already knew where I lived, this additional information wouldn't make a difference but might make him leave. I reluctantly gave him my number and he immediately tried to ring me. Once he saw it was really my number, he visibly relaxed and was out the door. The whole ordeal from watching me sleep to leaving lasted around 2 hours. He was completely mental but thankfully not violent. The cherry on the top was when the creep called me a week later. I hadn't saved his number, and after he had said his name, I just asked if he was that crazy couch surfer who woke me up at dawn requesting sex. Told him to never call again and hung up. He sent me a text saying, "You are the crazy one." And this was the last time I heard of him and the last time I hosted a couch surfer in my apartment. Creepy couch surfer dude. Let's not meet again. Around 2 years ago, my friend Jenny decided to throw a party for her birthday. She had not celebrated her birthday in many years and was really excited to do so again. Something important to know about Jenny is that she was an addict at this time. It was all kinds of different drugs. I think it mostly depended on whatever she could get at the time, but it was pretty bad. She is a lovely person and doing well right now, but I do think that her drug use was one of the reasons why all of this went so wrong. Her friend circle consisted mostly of people she used to hang out with. She had a few good and close friends, but not very many. A week before the party, I asked her how many people she had invited, and she said around 80. I laughed and asked her why so many. She said, "Well, I also invited people that I don't know really well, but they're chill." This was already kind of a red flag for me. That night, I had another party before hers, so I was already tipsy. I knew that the other party would be mostly people I did not know on hard drugs, which I had never done and had no experience with at the time, so I needed some liquid courage. I went with my friend Noah. She had rented a small venue to fit all of the people. It was a pretty much abandoned lot on a very quiet street. There were almost no houses, only a few factories. The layout is pretty important to know. Basically, you had the entrance with a tiny yard for people to smoke. Then you had to enter the building and go up the stairs to get to a living room or a kitchen type area. And next to that was a small room with a DJ. Everything was fine at the beginning. I did have a lot of fun. Around 1 o'clock, there was a small fight. I didn't witness it, but I was told immediately after. Apparently, there were 4 guys who tried to get in, but only one of them was actually invited. They were told to leave by some of the guys, and when they didn't, there was a small fight. Nothing noteworthy, I thought then. I asked Noah if he wanted to go out for a smoke. He said that he would finish his conversation, and then we could go together. A little while later, we walked out of the kitchen and towards the stairs, but there were like 6 people bundled up at the top of the stairs. Instinctively, I took a step back. I was just turning around to Noah with this "what the heck" look when we heard people screaming and glass shattering. All the people who were standing in front of us jumped back, and so did we. There was more screaming and people stumbling on the stairs. I then saw Oliver, one of the few people I knew at the party, walking up the stairs, head covered in blood. Another guy I knew by face with a bleeding nose, and my friend Jason grasping his shoulder, his girlfriend behind him. Earlier that evening, I stupidly and drunkenly fell on the cement with both knees scraping them open, but because of that, I knew where the first aid kit was. I never have any issues with blood. I can't handle other bodily fluids, but when somebody is bleeding, I can help them no problem. I saw Oliver go into the kitchen, and I wanted to go after him to help him. Now, this is about to get kind of gross, but bear with me. I saw Oliver had something stuck in his forehead. Because I heard the glass shattering, I assumed it was glass, but when I got closer, I saw that it was a piece of his skull sticking out of his forehead. That was way too much for me. Instantly sober, I promptly turned around and went into another room. He was surrounded by a lot of people though, and 911 was called immediately. Turns out that those guys who were rejected from the party came back with 30 other guys, carrying bats and steel pipes. They just started hitting the first people they saw, and they left as quickly as they came. The whole attack lasted no more than 30 seconds. I found my friend Jason, still grasping his shoulder. He and his girlfriend were closest to the entrance of the property, so they were attacked first. Yes, these cowards did indeed beat up women. They did not care at all. Jason's shoulder was dislocated. Luckily, his girlfriend wasn't too wounded. Police and an ambulance arrived pretty quickly. Oliver was taken to the hospital and luckily made a full recovery after surgery. My friend Jenny was hysterical, both because of what happened and because of what was in her system. The cops were no help. At one point, they yelled at her because she was too upset to form a complete sentence. They left after a while, and so did most of the people. Noah and I were still there. We tried to help whenever we could. I was still in shock and kind of dumb, but what snapped me out of my daze was seeing people scrubbing the blood covering the staircase. There was nothing more I could do there, and more importantly, I wanted to go home. Noah went with me and we stayed up for hours talking and processing everything. To think that if we hadn't decided to go smoke even a minute sooner, or if Noah hadn't been having that one conversation, we would have been in the middle of all of this. It would also have been a very real possibility that these guys had guns or knives. We lived in a pretty rough area, which is even more terrifying to think about. Hands down the worst party I've ever been to. So yeah, to those guys who ruined my friend's party, let's not meet again. So let me get a couple of things straight. Our little village was the kind of place where everybody knows everyone, and I could count the number of houses on 2 hands. We were a really quiet and close-knit community, and nothing ever happened there. Proper out in the sticks stuff. One night a few years ago, my mom and stepdad had gone out to this concert and left me in charge of my little brother and the dog. I wasn't very old, probably 14, and I felt really proud that my parents trusted me enough to do this. I thought I was a pretty cool big brother, and I thought we'd be doing cool babysitter stuff like staying up late, eating pizza and stuff. I'm kind of glad we did because I don't know what would have happened if we hadn't. At about 10:30 the power cut out. I didn't think anything of it because the weather hadn't been great lately, and I figured that had something to do with it. I got some candles out on the cupboard and lit them up and put some of our favorite songs on. As soon as I sat back down, Sonny, my little brother, turned to me and, being the weird little kid he was, told me very calmly that somebody was outside. I was a little perturbed by him, but the dog hadn't done anything, so I presumed it was just the neighbors or something. He just shrugged and went back to his drawings. There is a running joke in our house that you don't need a clock with the dog around because he is such a creature of habit that he will consistently get up at exactly the same time every night to tell you that it's time to initiate his nightly go-to-bed protocol. It was about 3/4 of an hour after the power went out when my dog decided that now was the time. I told Sonny to go get the dog his biscuit while I let him out for a pee. Now, our kitchen is an extension to the original house, and so as such, has a flat roof that's competitively low to the ground compared to the rest of the house and offers easy access to the bathroom window. As I opened the door so the dog could do his thing, Sonny pushed past me in the doorway and whispered, "I know you're out there, and I'm calling the police." As he turned around with the biggest, proudest smile you've ever seen on his face, there was a very distinct rustling coming from just above the doorway. I don't think I'll ever forget the way Sonny's face dropped when he looked just above my head. I looked up. The man sitting on the roof above me panicked, tried to kick me, and then ran off into the next door's garden, and presumably into the cornfields surrounding our village. I was scared shitless, and Sonny was bawling his eyes out. I ushered him inside as quickly as I could and got a knife from the kitchen. We both went to his room, and I told him to try and get some sleep while I waited for our parents to come back. It wasn't an agonizingly long 4 hours before they did. My stepdad immediately went outside to check to see if everything was okay. I heard them talking about how something had smashed the fuse box. Obviously, we called the police, but they didn't come until later that day. They did a search of the immediate premises and found a makeshift bed in a nearby disused barn, along with pictures of silhouettes of us in the shower through the frosted glass. I think it's pretty safe to say the whole experience definitely shook us up. We moved out as soon as we could, but I still shut curtains whenever I could, and I see shadows underneath every door I see. Sonny keeps quiet about it, but I'm not sure if that's just because his brain has cut it out or what. So yeah, weird kitchen roof stalker. Let's not meet, please. "13 to 14 years ago, when I was around 12 or 13, my family had a gathering at my grandma's house, which we did very often back then. My brother, cousins, both boys, and I, a girl, were playing in the inflatable pools in the backyard. The neighbor kid, probably my brother's age, like 15 or 16, climbed his fence so he could talk to us. We were having fun joking and chatting with him, so he asked if he would like to join us. My grandma gave the okay, and he came over to partake in the festivities. Everything was great until my cousins and brother went inside to help with something. I got nervous when they left, but I'm a socially anxious person who was especially nervous around guys, so I pushed it aside. Suddenly, the cool kid from next door became a jerk. He started hurling insults at me while smiling. I figured he was just playing around, so I did it back. We started splashing each other, but then he got super aggressive, splashing me so much that I kept taking in water. I turned my head away and told him to slow down, still kind of laughing. When he didn't stop, I got serious and told him to knock it off. He stopped. I was clearing my eyes of water when he grabbed the bucket. He filled it with water and put the bucket on my head. I went to take it off, but he shoved me down. I got the bucket off and asked what was wrong with him, and he just grabbed me and shoved my head under the water. I was flailing, searching for his face to scratch or hit, but the angle he was at made it impossible. I got dangerously close to passing out when he was pulled off me. I came up gasping for air, and my brother pulled me behind him and asked the kid what the heck he thought he was doing. This little douche laughed and said we were just playing. My brother stepped forward and asked how trying to drown me is playing. The kid kept smiling, and my brother told him he needs to stay away from us. The kid scoffed and angrily said, "You guys are boring anyway," and was escorted out by my sibling. We never said anything to the adults for reasons I can't understand, but the kid kept taunting us in his backyard. He even brought one of his friends to mock us and insult us, which resulted in us telling our family, so that stopped real quick. He tried to call us liars, but that wasn't believed. Shortly after that, the family moved, and we never dealt with him again. I'm very grateful for my brother, who essentially raised me. He's helped me in more ways than I can count. I don't know where I would be without him. I went to a wedding of my friend Courtney about 2 days ago, and I still can't shake my mind over what happened. For context, I grew up in a very religious household and went to church every Sunday, and Courtney is probably the only person from my old church that I still keep in contact with. The situation started at the reception. Courtney was super excited to see me and was definitely the only person who felt that way, judging from all the stares from people at my old church. I sat down at my table and started playing something on my phone when some guy sat next to me. He said that the seating chart said he was supposed to sit at my table and introduced himself as the groom's friend Anthony. He was pretty cute, so I spent a lot of time talking to him, and we really hit it off. He didn't seem to judge me for being an atheist and seemed genuinely interested in me. When the dance started, they started playing Brown Eyed Girl, and he offered to dance with me. We danced together for most of the night until he left to go to the bathroom, and a little later I did too. When I came out, I saw that my purse wasn't on the table, which was weird because I swore I left it there. I was tired and thought I had just left it in my car, so I went into the parking lot and into my car to look for it and found it on the center console. I still thought it was weird because I really thought I had brought it inside, but at that point it was pretty late in the night, so I didn't think much of it. I danced some more and noticed Anthony was gone. I asked the groom, who said he had gone home because he wasn't feeling good. Pretty soon I felt pretty sick too, so I said bye to Courtney and went to my car. As I put my keys in the ignition, I looked behind me and saw something weird. It looked like something had ducked down from the trunk. I took my keys out and looked back there, and that was when I saw him. Anthony was crouched down in the trunk of my car. I started screaming and ran out with him chasing after me. I went inside and told Courtney, who immediately told her husband, who walked me back to my car where Anthony was nowhere to be seen. Courtney's husband said that he didn't see his car anywhere, so he probably left. I left, and I still feel sick to my stomach thinking about it. He could have easily gone home with me and killed me if I hadn't looked back. Courtney said that she feels terrible that she invited him and that she had no idea he would do that. I haven't stepped out of my house since because I'm worried that if I do, he'll be waiting for me like he was before. Update. The last couple of days have been kinda crazy, so I haven't had the chance to look, but thank you all for your advice that I wish I would have known about earlier. Unfortunately, my address was on my ID, and as I learned now, Anthony took photos of it. Anthony and the groom aren't exactly friends, but they knew each other well enough for him to be invited. After the whole fiasco, the groom tried to text Anthony about it but got no response. Anthony showed up at my job and was lurking around the parking lot before he ran off when he saw security. He left me a note on my windshield that just says, "I'm watching." Security at my job has been notified about him, so hopefully I'm safe there. I was told by other people that went to the wedding that he was introducing himself as my boyfriend and that he was planning on proposing. I'm currently trying to file a restraining order against him and feel horrified. He lives in my city and knows where I live, so I'm staying in my aunt's house as I speak. If anything happens, I will update again. This happened when I was about 11. My two friends and I, all of us male, were swimming in my friend's backyard one night around 10 p.m. My friend's house borders the junior high school property and is separated by a chain link fence. As we were swimming, I looked over and I saw a tall man dressed in black in a baseball hat, standing there zombie-like almost, just watching us. For some reason, I didn't get scared. I just thought it was weird. I mentioned him to my friends, who both look over and immediately start screaming their heads off and screaming away to get out the pool. Their reaction woke me the heck up to the reality of the situation, and I almost crapped my swimming suit. We were one by one trying to use the ladder, and I was in the rear, so as I'm waiting, I look over, and the guy is scrambling up the fence as fast as he can. He made it to the house and managed to slam the door and lock it as he reached the door. This was the back door, which was like 80% clear glass, so he just stood there looking at us as we screamed our heads off. I notice he's holding a freaking baseball bat. We run and hide behind the living room couch. He keeps juggling the doorknob, but luckily never uses the bat to break the glass, which would have been easy. He walks away, and my friend runs and turns the security alarm on and calls his dad, who was off running errands. My friend's dad said he was almost home and to stay inside. Anyways, we turn the TV on and start to calm down when all of a sudden the freaking alarm goes off. I almost crapped my swimming suit for the second time, and our stupid 11-year-old minds decide just standing there screaming was the best option. My friend's dad happened to get home while this was happening. Gives the operator the secret password that everything is good, grabs his gun, and searches the property and doesn't find anyone. We still swam at night after that and never met the crazy dude again. Also, I'm 25 now, so don't ask why we didn't just call the cops or why my friend's dad didn't call the cops. I have no idea why we didn't. My wife and I purchased our house about 6 years ago and decided to start a family. I love our neighborhood and our neighbors, and especially love to go out for long walks at night. Our neighbor is a single mom and has 3 kids. Never really thought much about it, though I would often remark to my wife about how awesome it was that she could afford such a nice house and always seemed to be around. It became apparent one day, though, that something was wrong. We started seeing different things sprinkled around our house. Fake plastic flowers tied to her mailbox, dressed up with ribbons and doll heads. Pretty creepy stuff. After a quick powwow with my neighbors, we found out that she had a history of mental disorders, and they all feared that she had stopped taking her medication. Over the period of a couple of weeks, she began acting more and more erratic. She would peel out of her driveway in her car, race up and down the street, wander around, and come up to various neighbors and give them random presents. A rock, shiny stone, a plastic toy, etc. One evening, I go out on one of my regular walks, and I can instantly tell that something is up. Her car is parked sideways on her driveway. Every exterior and interior light was on in and around her house, and she was pacing back and forth in her yard. I crossed the street and hid in some shadows and just decided to observe her. I have training in human development and am a generalist in knowledge around emotional and behavioral disorders. Suddenly, I saw her sprint across the street to my side of the street and jump up on my neighbor's porch right in front of the door and just stand there. She stood there for a good 10 minutes and then very slowly turned around and started to walk back across the street. I thought about calling the police, but she was technically not doing anything wrong. Well, maybe trespassing, but I knew her kids were friends with these neighbors' kids. So I started walking across the street and intercepted her. I did not startle her and said loudly, "Hi, how are you?" Now, I don't have any direct experience working with people during breakdowns, and after seeing her eyes and behavior, I have no desire ever to. She immediately was friendly and said hi and asked about my pregnant wife, and that was when I noticed that she had 2 open lock knives in each hand. Now, I was creeped out, but still did not feel like I was in danger. I continued talking, and she suddenly said, "I really need your help. I can't get my DVD player to work. Can you fix it for me?" My curiosity was out of control at this point, and I am so much larger than her. Not that it means anything. I guess when a person is out of their minds, but I figured if I was cautious, it would be okay. I entered her house and literally walked up into a nightmare. The place was trashed. There were garbage bags and dirt on the floor. All of her possessions were stacked up in various areas of the living room and kitchen. There were broken light fixtures, and the kitchen sink was filled with dishes and rotting food. Suddenly, she went full on with manic behavior, started explaining how the different piles were different cities, and then became completely nonsensical in her speech. She was using English words but completely out of context. Example, painting, dish, box, pool, barbell. And then would look at me for a reaction. Honestly, I should not have been there, but I had just finished up 2 years of studying human development, including schizophrenia, which is definitely what she was. It was just so utterly fascinating to me, and even though she still had the knives, I never felt threatened by her. In fact, the opposite. She was so glad to have company. I started to quickly scan her house looking for weapons, drugs, or anything else that she could harm someone with. She led me upstairs, which was completely trashed as well. She was using small potted plants with the plants half dead in them as ashtrays. Her clothes were everywhere. I went into her master bedroom and honestly did try to set up the DVD player while she randomly walked around the house talking. Even though the TV was like mine, I could just not get the TV to recognize the DVD player for some reason, and I was starting to get a bit nervous. During this time, I noticed that she had set the knives down, and I quickly folded them up and pocketed them. I apologized to her that I couldn't get the DVD player to work, and then asked her if she thought it was time for her to take her medicine. She assured me that she already had and asked me if I had a joint. I told her no. I scanned the upstairs and saw no more knives or weapons, and it was sad. You could tell that her kids had left in a hurry. Their rooms were trashed, and they had left their Nintendo DS's behind. Not seeing any more weapons, I went back downstairs to double check the kitchen, but she was watching me now, and I didn't want to be obvious. I apologized for not being able to help her, but thought it was time we both went to bed and that she might want to stay inside now. She agreed with me. I left, and when finally outside, realized that I had just walked into her madness, and even I felt a little strange afterwards. It had just been too bizarre. The next day was Mother's Day. I found out later that her husband's parents had taken her kids away for a week before that due to her erratic behavior. With Mother's Day approaching, she just lost it even more. Eventually, she went away and came back about a month later and was back to her normal self. Friendly but subdued. I still live down the street from her and say hi to her, but it is the saddest thing to see. You can tell she is on her medication and regulated, but she has no emotion and no personality. She lost her husband and her children to her disease, but the big unknown is where she gets her money. The leading theory is very wealthy parents. She used to be a corporate buyer for a large corporation, buying large lots of goods all over the country, which I believe is tied into the various cities she farmed in her house with her things. She had another episode about a year ago, and I found out that I am now her reach-out person during them. I was working in my yard, and she came up to me raving mad that they would not put a stop sign on my street, which I actually agree with her about, and started swearing and ranting, and then gave me a glass stone that she told me would protect me and my beautiful family. She is back to being fine now, but I know what signs to look for around her house. I still have the glass stone and keep it on a ledge I can see when I walk down the stairs of my house. To me, it serves as a reminder of how truly lucky I am with what I have and how bad life can be for those afflicted with mental illness. Update. Her teenage son was just killed while out skateboarding at night. She is off her medication right now. As if the tragedy could not get any worse, she came over to see me and broke down crying in my arms. This is such a tragedy. I'm glad I can at least be there for her. When I was 11, I used to walk home from school. It was my first year doing that. To get to my front door, you had to go up a set of stairs, and before that, there was a small gate. I lived, well, at that time, at the end of a long driveway. I'm French, by the way. That day, I opened and closed the gate like usual and went up the stairs like usual and had just taken out my key to unlock the door when suddenly an old lady appeared, pressed up the gate behind me. To this day, I don't know if she had followed me or if she had been hiding somewhere near my house and came out and saw me. I hadn't noticed anyone behind me while I was walking, but I wasn't paying that much attention either. And there's only my house at the end of the driveway. She couldn't have come from somewhere further down. She asked me if she could go pick apples in my garden. It might sound harmless, but the way she appeared made me immediately suspicious. I honestly admire my 11-year-old self because I told her I would go ask my dad and come back to tell her. The thing is, nobody was home. I opened the door and locked it behind me. Very quickly, I saw the front door handle move. She was trying to open my door, probably thinking I hadn't locked it. The time between me entering the house and her trying the door was so short that it means that she didn't even wait a second behind the gate. The moment I went inside, she came up, opened the gate, and climbed up the stairs. And honestly, trying to open someone's door instead of waiting for them to come back is already extremely suspicious. That's when all my instincts were confirmed. I panicked and went to hide in the basement. As I was going down, I had heard knocking on the door. I was shaking. Sure, she was just an old lady, but who's to say she wasn't armed or even that she wasn't really that old? What if that was her disguise? I hid inside a couch in the basement with the lights off. After a while, I came back upstairs. I hadn't heard any glass breaking or the door being forced open, and my key was still in the lock, so she couldn't have used a duplicate. I looked out the window and saw her. She was standing at a distance watching the house. She didn't see me. Eventually, she turned around and left. I was scared to come home alone for about 2 months after that. My parents never really understood what happened and always downplayed it. I sometimes wonder if they were just uncomfortable with the idea. To this day, I don't know what the heck was even that. This happened about 10 years ago when I was 14. I am German. My mother's family emigrated to Bolivia when she was little. She feels Bolivian, and a lot of my family is now part Bolivian. And a lot still lives there. My mother came to Germany after 30 years of living in Bolivia, and I was born there. My uncle, who lives in Germany as well, got married to a Bolivian woman. I'll call her Yolanda, and I always liked her. One day, a guy from Bolivia added me on Facebook. Turns out it's Yolanda's brother. Technically, he's family, so I accepted his request. He started chatting with me on Facebook, all in very broken English since I can't speak Spanish. Pretty soon, the conversation started to shift from family stuff to him being flirty. And I mean really flirty. He was in his mid-20s then and I was 14. I told him I didn't want him to be so flirty with me and he said sorry and that was it. For a day. He then literally spammed me with messages about how I was the most beautiful girl in the world and how he would marry me if he could. I ignored him. A few weeks later, he told me he would book a flight to see his sister and that he would visit me and that we'd get married. I told Yolanda and Uncle, and they both told me he was just a fascinated guy by German girls and to not take him seriously. As weeks go by, he's telling me how he'll be out there soon and to expect him. I finally told him that I'm a lesbian. Bolivians tend to be a tad more homophobic. I'm not. I just wanted my peace. He was obviously disappointed and didn't contact me for a while. He never came to Germany. When he finally chatted me up again with the same old stuff, I blocked him. I told my whole family about this guy. The only people who told me I wasn't overreacting were my brothers and my mom. Everybody else blamed me for hurting that poor guy. A year went by, my aunt had gotten Facebook. Now he was harassing me from her account, telling me he would always love me and come and marry me. I had to block like 4 other people from my family since he used their accounts. To this day, I keep getting friend requests from his accounts or family members. So creepy distant relative, let's not ever meet. Edit. To clarify, I don't think all Bolivian people are this way. My aunt's family is just kind of weird. I never meant to be hurtful to Bolivians. Canadian female here. When I was 14, my family went on a camping trip. The group consisted of my parents, grandparents, my 12-year-old sister, and my 7-year-old cousin. My cousin was getting pretty bored of campfires as a kid does, so we decided to walk to a park a couple of streets over. We were parked in a campground, as opposed to out in the woods, so this park was accessible and in the sight of the majority of campers. It was a good 5-minute walk from our site though, far enough away that my parents wouldn't be able to hear or really see anything that was going on. We sat on the swings for about 5 to 10 minutes before a girl around my age walked over. I saw her coming because her tent was directly across from the park. She sat on the swing beside me and started talking, asking me where we camped, how long we'd been here for, what music I liked and stuff. She kept her head down the whole time, making eye contact maybe 3 times. She seemed distracted and possibly upset, so I smiled and tried to make friends. Unfortunately, that wasn't her plan. About 10 minutes into our conversation, she said goodbye and headed back to her tent. Not 2 minutes passed before a man in his mid-20s stepped out after her and proceeded to walk towards me with a huge grin on his face. He must have been her brother. My first reaction was to assume he was mentally handicapped. Why would an older man be smiling at me so excitedly? I gave him a small smile and tried to look away, but he was barreling down the street towards me, refusing to break eye contact. When he reached me, he said, "Hey," and asked me how old I was, what my name was, etc. I stayed sitting in my swing, responding politely as a naive 14-year-old would as my sister and cousin stared at him. They were obviously freaked out but didn't know what to do. He then asked me if I liked Justin Bieber. Even though I wanted to support our fellow artists, I said no. He then asked me if I liked One Direction. I said they were okay. What Makes You Beautiful had just been released and I genuinely enjoyed it, which I had talked about with who I assumed was his sister. He asked me if I wanted tickets. At this point, my sister and cousin, although so young, knew something bad was happening. They took off sprinting towards our trailer and I started standing up getting ready to leave. I told him no, I didn't want tickets. I felt squeamish as I had a feeling he wasn't asking for money. As a 14-year-old who looked 11, it was obvious that I didn't carry cash and there was no way in heck that he wanted me to go ask my parents for some. He persisted, listing Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, Bruno Mars, etc. I started walking away at this point and told him no, that I wasn't interested. I got scared that he was going to follow me, but thankfully he didn't. And I was able to walk home at a normal pace. When I got there, my cousin was crying while my sister was trying to explain what was going on. I tried to calm them down and told everyone what happened. Again, as a naive child, I started pushing down my feelings of danger and instead forced myself to believe he was simply selling concert tickets. Thankfully, my mom is quite strong-headed and saw through it. She made me point out the campsite and dragging me with her, walked up to the family and gave them shit. I was embarrassed at the time, but thankfully, my mom is as confident and tough as she is. I'll never know what exactly he wanted from me, and I'll never know what he did to that little girl to turn her into a scout for his sick scam. But I am glad that I had the paranoid, ballsy family that I do to protect me. Who knows what would have happened if I didn't. I've tried to write this story for over a year now. Maybe I'll finally hit post this time. 22 years ago, I was 11 years old. Growing up, I was always taught to always respect adults, especially when in somebody else's home. I was the youngest of 3. My dad traveled frequently on business, and my mom was usually busy working or driving the older 2 siblings to whatever they had going on. This meant that I spent a lot of time in other people's homes. I was always very friendly and polite and enjoyed speaking to adults. I was also an extremely nervous kid and tried my best to hide it. My mom was very emotionally abusive to me, and I believed her when she blamed my being a horrible child for her abusive actions. Therefore, I was constantly in fear that somebody would just find out how truly awful I was. My approach to life at 11 years old was be polite, never make waves, and don't make mom mad. It was the week of 4th of July, and a girl I went to school with, Leah, invited me and another girl, Carla, over to swim in her pool and spend the night. I'd known both girls for about 5 or 6 years, but had only recently become better friends. My mom dropped me off and gave me the usual, have fun and don't embarrass me. I remember having so much fun the whole day. I was young for my grade, so while I was still 11, Leah and Carla were 12. They flirted with boys and wore bras and stuff. But I was a tomboy and flat as the floor. Leah and Carla were cool. We had the best time together. At night, we did girly things like talk about boys and play with makeup. It was so different from my normal summer night hangouts, playing capture the flag with the neighborhood boys. The next morning, we were still giggling and having fun. Leah asked her mom if Carla and I could spend the night again. She said yes, and we jumped around with excitement. It was the 4th of July, and Leah's dad was coming back from wherever he had been the night before with fireworks. A bit later, Leah's dad pulled into the driveway. I'd never met him before. He stepped out of the car wearing cut-off jeans shorts and no shirt, smoking a cigarette. His hair was straggly and greasy. Leah said, "Hey, Dad," and he replied, "Who is this?" looking at me. I introduced myself, and he walked inside. Leah's mom told us to pick things up around the house because they were having some people over. We did as she asked. I remember noticing a shift in the overall vibe in the house, though. This was something I was familiar with, as my mom could change the feeling in our house from warm and happy to ice cold and spiteful, in a blink of an eye. Typically, there was some sort of yelling that accompanied the shift in my house, though. It was different at Leah's, as everyone appeared to be going on as usual. A couple hours later, we went outside with Leah's dad. He had an enormous slingshot thing that he made in the garage. He asked me if I wanted to see what it did. Sure, I said. He put a potato in it and launched the thing into a field across the street. He asked if I wanted to try it. Really? Yeah. I would never be allowed to do this at home, so of course I took him up on it. Leah and Carla wanted to try it too. He gave a quick sure and walked away to grab another beer. Once they were finished, he asked if I'd like him to show me some cool tricks that he could do with the slingshot. He addressed me directly by name. He did not ask Leah or Carla. This felt weird, but I smiled and wanted to keep being polite since he was an adult and I was in his home. Friends of Leah's parents started to trickle in. Leah, Carla, and I went back and forth between playing in the pool and the garage. Every time he went back into the garage, Leah's dad would ask me lots of questions and comment on how cool I was. He asked me if I had a boyfriend yet and if I too had started wearing a bra like Leah. Leah just kind of laughed and said something like, "Stop talking about my bra. Jeez." I smiled and tried to hide how uncomfortable I actually felt. A few minutes later, a man arrived with his daughter. This dude was Leah's dad's best friend. And Leah's dad began calling my name, motioning me to come over. "Dude, this is Leah's friend. She is really cool and she loves our slingshot." Leah's dad and that dude built it together. He said, "Oh yeah? Hi, Leah's friend." "Hi, nice to meet you," I said. As the night continued, it felt like every time Leah, Carla, and I were near Leah's dad and that dude, they had something to ask me or tell me. Leah and Carla didn't seem to think that was weird or even notice, really. It was now dark. The fireworks were done, and I was really getting tired of having to engage in conversation with Leah's dad and that dude. They smelled like cigarettes, and they put their arms around my shoulders a couple of times. I didn't like them touching me, but I never said anything. I acted like everything was fine and just laughed it off. I suggested that we go back to Leah's room to play this game that we had played a few times over the last couple of days. Finally, we were away from them. Then Leah's dad and that dude came into Leah's room and said we should come outside to the bonfire for s'mores. They also had another brilliant idea for us, that we should sleep in the camper tonight. Leah's family had a camper at the very end of the backyard, right next to the bonfire. Leah and Carla loved the idea, but it made me feel sick. I didn't want to spoil any fun, and I didn't want to offend Leah's dad or dude. They were adults, and I was still in Leah's dad's house, so I had to be nice, but all I wanted to do was run away from both of them. We were walking out to the backyard carrying blankets and pillows. Dude walked up to us and said his daughter wanted to join us in the camper tonight. Dude's daughter was only a year or so younger than me, which was 10, but she was smaller and acted much younger. She was timid and very quiet. When she did speak, it was almost babyish. Leah's dad and dude were getting more drunk by the minute, and after we finished getting set up in the camper, dude's daughter asked me to take her back to the house to go to the bathroom. I just met her a few hours before, but she seemed to sort of cling to me. When we were walking back to the house, about half a football field from the camper, dude's daughter grabbed my hands while we were walking. She asked if she could sleep next to me in the camper. Sure, I said. On the way back from the bathroom, dude's daughter took my hand again and held it tightly the entire way back as she sucked her thumb. She clung to me and asked me again if I was going to sleep next to her. This made me even more nervous. I just wanted to run away. We all got situated in the camper, and Leah, Carla, and dude's daughter were asleep pretty quickly. Leah's dad and dude were joined by another guy whose voice I didn't recognize. All three were right outside the camper sitting by the bonfire. They were very drunk and loud. Something was wrong about this situation, and I was hoping that I'd make it through the night. Suddenly they were quiet. I felt the camper moving. The door was opening. It was Leah's dad. He whispered, "Leah's friend," using my real name. "Hey, Leah's friend." My back was turned toward him, and I pretended to be asleep. Didn't move and didn't answer. I just waited. After a few minutes, he went back outside. I heard him say, "She's asleep." Dude told him to just wake her up and tell her that we have something to show her. A few minutes later, Leah's dad returned again and started whispering my name. When he went back outside, Leah's dad told him I wasn't waking up. The third guy told him to just shake me. Thankfully, I positioned myself furthest from the door on an upper bunker with dude's daughter next to me. Leah and Carla happily took the bottom beds, which blocked any way of reaching me or dude's daughter. Leah's dad and dude came into the camper a few more times after that, but didn't say anything. They eventually passed out around the fire. I thought that night would never end, but eventually it did. When we finally got out of the camper, we went back to the house and I called my mom to pick me up. It was like nothing ever happened. I literally felt crazy the next day. I was surrounded by people, yet nobody noticed. I questioned myself and the entire experience for years. What if I was just being paranoid? What if I had interpreted the whole night completely wrong? Leah and I quickly drifted apart. I never went back to her house, and I never told anyone what happened that night. Over 10 years later, during a visit to my parents, my mom was going on about all the gossip that she'd heard recently. I was half listening when she mentioned, "That girl Leah from grade school, do you remember her?" Her father had been in the local paper a few months earlier. He had been arrested and charged with sexual molestation. Apparently, there had been other claims a couple of years prior to his arrest, but nothing came of those. I had no interest in knowing anything more about him or the outcome. I knew in my heart what he and his friends had in mind that night, but I worried about offending someone or how it would look if I had asked to leave. I didn't want Leah to be hurt or embarrassed, so I pretended to be oblivious to her dad's blatantly disgusting behavior. I still hate it when somebody tries to put their arm on top of my shoulder. After reading some of the comments, I've decided to add a part I originally chose to leave out. When I was 3 or 4, my parents went on vacation out of the country. My siblings and I were left with a family my mom knew through a friend. While my siblings were at school during the day, I stayed back. The dad was just like Leah's dad, and I was not able to escape him, and things did not end the way they did in the camper. When I was at Leah's, I knew something was wrong because I felt the same way I'd back when I was 3. Dude's daughter's behavior only confirmed my fears. I wish I would have said something comforting to Dude's daughter in the moment or hugged her to keep her safe. But I didn't. I didn't say much of anything. I did have her sleep next to me on the top bunk, but that's about it. When I was about 9, I mentioned what happened when they were on vacation. My mom completely shot me down. She said there was no way it happened. She said I would have tried to fight him off and would have never let anyone touch me. Her response made me believe it had been my fault and I let it happen. I also learned I couldn't rely on her for support. The morning she picked me up from Leah's, I knew she wouldn't believe me, or worse, she would blame me. I later learned that this was her way of escaping responsibility. If she had acknowledged what happened, that would mean she would be admitting that she maybe made a mistake in her parenting choices. I'm from Finland, and this happened to me 16 years ago when I was a 7-year-old boy. It was a hot summer weekend, and I was at a jazz festival on the other side of the country with my parents and family friends. The festival was mostly peaceful, with lots of all kinds of people, but mostly older folks enjoying the music, food stalls, and sunshine. There were security guards patrolling the area, and overall it felt really safe. I don't know anything about jazz at that age, but I was mostly hanging with the other family's kid, who was close to my age. I remember the grilled food and the ridiculous amount of soda because of the heat. Some people were a little bit drunk, but my dad and the other father just had a couple of beers and kept things pretty chill. My mom was pregnant at the time with my little sister, so this definitely wasn't some crazy party for our group. It was getting late and one of the final bands was playing. I had to use the bathroom, so I went with the other dad and his son to the toilets. After I finished, I stepped aside to wait for them just a few meters from the toilet. That's when he appeared. An older man, maybe around 60, walked up to me. He looked very filthy, smelled horrible, and had stained and torn clothes. His face was bright red from sunburn. His nose looked rotten and he had no teeth. He looked scary. Something about him made me feel uncomfortable, but as a kid I was polite and didn't want to be rude, even though I definitely should have walked away. He started talking to me. I don't remember what he said at first, but then he offered me some candy and coins. Then he told me I should come with him. I froze. It felt very strange because nothing like that had ever happened to me before, and I didn't understand what he meant by it. I said something like, "I don't want to go. I need to go to my parents." He repeated himself, more aggressively this time. He had a very creepy look on his face, too. I was looking at the toilets and hoping that my company would come out soon. That's when he suddenly grabbed my arm and began pulling me toward him. He was very aggressive, and I began to scream and cry very loud. 2 random men happened to be nearby, and they saw and probably understood the situation. They rushed over and confronted that man, tackled him to the ground even, and almost immediately after that, our family's friend's dad and his son came to the scene. The dad was also helping the other men to keep him down while he was struggling and yelling on the ground. Security showed up within a minute and escorted the old man off the festival area. A woman came to comfort me and we rushed back to my parents. My mom was absolutely horrified. My dad was furious. I calmed down pretty quick and the situation was basically over. Oddly enough, the police never came. I don't know if anyone filed an official report about that. The old man was already taken away, so that was that. I was too young to understand the full weight of what almost happened. I wasn't traumatized by it, at least not in the way that stuck with me emotionally. But I've always avoided drunk or sketchy looking people ever since. Now that I'm older, I sometimes think about how that scenario could have turned out really bad. And if I ever have my own kids, you can bet I'll be very clear with them. Never talk to strangers ever. Hey, this is my first post ever, so apologies ahead of time for any mistakes or things I'm oblivious to. This story is about my brief friendship with the guy that damn near stalked me, and I'm sharing it for some closure, I think. I started my freshman year of college at a university in my hometown that's pretty nice. I'm not going to share too much about it, but it has a smaller amount of students, but enough that you don't really run into people often. I lived on campus and I was only 17. I had Tinder, of course, as I was fresh out of a relationship and looking to experience new things in college. I matched with this one boy named Asher, who seems nice enough. I'm pretty socially awkward, but I never really minded because I have anxiety issues myself and I'm really sympathetic to it. Because of that, I ignored a lot of warning signs I shouldn't have. We texted for a while and he seemed really nice and caring. He wanted to know a lot about me, which I wasn't too keen on sharing, but I told him the basics and we texted kind of regularly. He lived on campus as well and invited me to hang out. At that time, things didn't seem too sketchy, so I was completely down. When I first met him, that's when things started to get uncomfortable. We hung out in his dorm, which was pretty standard overall. I got cozy with him on his couch. I'd say almost cuddling, but not quite. Still really standard. When we started talking more, I realized how uncomfortable things really were. He kept making comments that just put me off, but I tried to ignore them. Things like, "I've never cuddled with anyone before. Sorry if I'm doing it wrong." So many comments about how he already liked me a lot and wanted to stay with me forever. Weird word choice, but whatever, he's just trying to be nice. I'll let him down easy. I ended that hangout pretty quickly for some fake excuse and went right back to my room. He kept texting me and professing how much he was into me, and I told him, sorry, but I'm not looking for any kind of relationship, so I do not want to keep things romantic. A bad lie, but I'm very non-confrontational and didn't want to be mean. That's when things started to get even worse. He sent me this long paragraph saying how it was okay I didn't want a relationship now and that he would wait for me and save his virginity for me. We had never even talked about anything sexual. I had never even really told him I liked him or even flirted back. I just never properly turned him down. It was one of the creepiest messages I've ever received. Unfortunately, that was just the start of all the weird things to come. He wouldn't leave me alone even though I started to try to de-escalate things, and I kept running into him all over campus. I wasn't sure how he suddenly was nearby when my classes ended, and I wasn't sure why suddenly we'd both be in the dining hall at the same times, even though I hadn't changed my regular routine, but I just tried to brush it off. Definitely a mistake. I ended up turning him down completely because I was getting creeped out and couldn't figure out how he wasn't understanding that I didn't want anything romantic or sexual with him. He started guilt-tripping me, telling me how he was upset and nobody was ever going to love him. I've been in a manipulative relationship in the past, and I recognized that behavior right away and shut it down. I told him I couldn't be friends with him, and in my head that was that. He didn't reply for a while, but when he did, it took an even worse turn. I was luckily out of town at the time for a concert, so that made me feel a lot better. He went off, sent me paragraphs after paragraphs about how horrible of a person I was and how I was a slut and I needed to be put in my place, etc. Regular r/nice guy things. I could handle this though. I just ignored it. Then once the regret set in, he made it his mission to win my love however possible. He apologized profusely, told me how he couldn't be all alone, I was his only friend, and how much he loved me. Whatever. Terrible, but I didn't care about that. Then I guess to prove his dedication, he did the creepiest thing yet. First, he told me he was outside of my room. We did not live in the same dorm building, and you can't get into the building unless you live there. I don't know who let him in. I wasn't there, my roommate was out, so that was okay. I texted back at that point and told him to leave and how wrong and creepy that was, and he pulled out his last resort. He sent me screenshots of my contact in his phone. On Apple devices, you can fill in tons of information and have a note section. Everything was entirely full. He knew my home address, my room number on campus, my parents' and brothers' names, my pets' names, and my schedule. It was very terrifying because I'm a fairly private person. My Instagram is my only social media, and I do not share that much on it. I don't think I'll ever find out how he discovered all of that about me. I blocked him on everything right away and reported him to the school. The school did nothing at all. And I still see him on campus. And he even tries to approach me when he sees me. I always duck and run, and it's worked so far. To the terrifying Tinder match who still may be following me around to this day, let's not meet. Edit. Hey guys, thank you for all of your advice and kind words. I definitely think I'm going to take further action for my own safety, and if anything else happens with it, I'll update everyone. I live in a pretty rough neighborhood. I have 4 other housemates, but they're all away for the festive season. We are students. At Christmas, I was gifted one of those Ring doorbells that have a camera. I attached it to the frame outside my door, which looks out towards an old pub. A couple of days went by, and then the postman rang the doorbell, which was pleasant. It worked a treat. However, a couple of days later, on my way back from work, I noticed that the Ring bell had been stolen. I hadn't even thought about this. Of course it had been stolen. I was annoyed but wasn't surprised. This is where it gets creepy though. Last night the doorbell rang through to my phone. It was very late and I was still alone in the house. The screen was dark, but it was just an image of the house. The person that stole it was sitting outside, filling my house with my own Ring doorbell. I was shaken. The area is rough and I have been assaulted and robbed once before. The image quickly turned black as if the culprit had placed the doorbell back in their pocket. I peered out of the curtain at around where I thought the person had been filming the house from, but nobody was there. Edit. Well, that's the first of my housemates to return back for the upcoming semester. After seeing how shaken I was about the whole thing, they admitted that it was indeed a prank played by another one of my flatmates. Thanks for all the supportive comments. I will need to think of a way to get them back, and when I reattach this doorbell, I'm going to make sure it's stuck for good.